In a long string of defeats, Ukraine has just delivered to Russia its most humiliating one to date. Kherson is officially liberated. But Russia retreating across the entire east could be really bad news for Ukraine. The stunning counteroffensive that began in September was initially believed to be only a flash in the pan for Ukraine. After a long string of slow but gradual defeats, it was inconceivable that Ukraine had the ability to so thoroughly beat Russian troops on the battlefield. And that might have been the case if not for two things: Western aid and good old-fashioned Ukrainian grit. The counteroffensive that would change the course of the war had its roots in the start of the summer, when Ukraine began thinking of delivering a counterpunch to overstretched Russian lines. With an initial invasion force of just under 200,000 troops, it was clear from the start of the war that Russia's military was poorly equipped to occupy even just the east of the country. Once it became obvious that Russia would not win the swift victory it had planned for, Western analysts began to look hard at the numbers, and even with support from the separatist regions, everyone came to the same conclusion: Russia didn't have the numbers to take the entire country. It might not even have the numbers to take and hold the east. At the start of the war, Ukraine had just under 250,000 troops, along with a whopping 2 million reservists, many of whom had combat experience from fighting the rebels in the breakaway regions. Russia was relying on the perceived superiority of its military technology and equipment to win a quick war. But corruption, ineptitude, and very poor doctrine inevitably revealed this force multiplier to be significantly less effective than believed to be, even by the West. Add in a rapid influx of man-portable anti-tank and anti-defense systems from the US and EU, and it became clear Russia had kicked the hornet's nest, and now it was time for the hornets to sting back. The initial plan drawn up by Ukraine remains classified, but what is known is that US military leadership immediately rejected the proposal and set about working with their Ukrainian counterparts to draw up a new counteroffensive plan for the coming fall. With their combined expertise, the two nations' senior military staff drew up a plan that would capitalize on both Ukraine's strengths and Russia's weaknesses. HIMARS would be the star of the show, with Ukraine making use of the long-range high-precision weapon system to destroy supply lines and command posts, making it difficult for Russia to maintain command and control centers close to the front lines, while also resupplying their troops. A clever deception campaign convinced the Russians that the Ukrainians would attack Kherson directly, thus prompting them to move several battalion tactical groups from the north of the captured territories to the south. An attack toward Kherson would signal the start of the counteroffensive, but within days, it became clear that Russia had been bamboozled, as a swift and overwhelming thrust north overwhelmed Russian positions there. Scrambling to hold the line in the north, Russia found itself unable to both defend the much more strategically important Kherson region and its lines of communication running south out of Russia into the northeast of Ukraine. The Russian Ministry of Defense and Russian military bloggers online all claimed that Ukraine simply took advantage of weakened Russian positions, and that's why they achieved so much success in the north. However, that myth was finally put to rest on November 11th when Ukrainian troops tore down the Russian flags flying in Kherson and returned the Ukrainian colors to their place. Ukraine had outfought, outmaneuvered, and outwitted a far superior Russian force, fighting on defensible terrain, forcing a panicked retreat over 48 hours from November 9th to the 10th. That saw rearguard Russian forces trying desperately to buy time for command posts to be evacuated. As we make this video, Ukraine is in control of Kherson, and this puts critical Russian bases in Crimea directly under threat from their BFF HIMARS. But while this is a stunning victory, Russia's retreat could be bad news for Ukraine. First, Russia is a very sore loser. We've seen this time and again as Putin's forces are humiliated, and then he resorts to attacking defenseless civilians. This tactic of using Russia's ever-shrinking stockpile of precision weapons and drones to attack civilians and their infrastructure is, as most military analysts have put it, absolutely asinine, given that those same weapons would be better employed against the military targets Russian forces keep retreating from. But it's not just about Putin's ego being as big as his former warship, now submarine, the Moskva. It's also a concerted effort to try to defeat Ukraine's will to fight. If Russia can't beat the Ukrainian military, it would rather destroy the civilian population's will to continue fighting. By targeting residential blocks and shopping malls, Russia wants to terrorize the population into submission. The destruction of power plants and power distribution networks is meant to deprive the Ukrainian people of electricity right as winter approaches, when they'll need it most to heat their homes. So while Ukraine's military victories mount, Russia's willingness to commit war crimes only increases. As of the making of the show, there is yet to be a retaliatory attack by Russia, but one is sure to come. One can only guess as to the scale of the attack and the price innocent civilians will have to pay for the Russian military's ineptitude. Liberating Kherson will place pressure on additional fronts, though. To put it simply, Putin is looking for an out that will preserve his legitimacy, but to date, Russian forces have failed to secure even the breakaway regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. The only way Putin would have been able to swallow losing the regional capital of Kherson was if his military commanders promised him they could put those troops to use, pushing Ukrainian forces out of the separatist regions entirely for once and for all. So freedom for Kherson means increased and desperate fighting for forces and civilians in Luhansk and Donetsk. There's a significant strategic concern as well with Russia's retreat from Kherson, however. The taking of the city is a huge boon to both the morale of Ukraine's military and its ability to continue prosecuting the war. But Ukraine was unable to prevent a mass retreat by Russian forces. This means that thousands of Russian soldiers will live to fight another day, and even more importantly, they're now safely on the other side of a very difficult river crossing. Just ask the Russians how difficult river crossings can be. Russia had long been preparing for a retreat from Kherson, though, and has delivered prefabricated concrete fighting positions to the eastern riverbank. These concrete structures are blast-resistant and can withstand small arms fire, while allowing private conscriptovich inside to return fire with relative safety. The fact that there's no functioning bridge that military vehicles can use to cross Dnipro River means that Ukraine will have to either attempt to build a pontoon bridge or use ferries like the Russians did. But ferries are slow and can only move limited amounts of equipment at a time, which is why the Russians were forced to leave so much of it behind. Few ferries are available or even rated to carry heavy main battle tanks. And pontoon bridges are famously risky affairs, as the enemy can easily zero in on your bridge and destroy it with air power or artillery the moment vehicles begin to cross it. If there's a saving grace in all this for Ukraine, it's the fact that the Ukrainian military is not as, operationally challenged as the Russian military. Back in Bilohorivka, the Russians made multiple attempts to cross a river at the exact same spot, despite every single attempt being blasted to pieces by the Ukrainian artillery. Because junior officers are not allowed to make battlefield decisions on their own, senior commanders sitting happily in a rear area insisted the crossing of the Seversky Donets be repeated in the exact same area over and over again. Estimates put Russia's losses at an entire battalion tactical group's worth of men and equipment. The incident was a military disaster of such a scale that the United States trolled Russia publicly on its U.S. Army Europe and Africa Twitter account. Ukraine has its eyes on Crimea now, and Kherson gives it a staging ground to do so. However, it must cross the Dnipro River and then defeat the heavily fortified Russian forces there. This is going to be a significant challenge even for battle-hardened Ukrainian forces, and while the liberation of Kherson was a huge strategic victory, until the Dnipro can be bridged successfully, Ukraine faces a steep uphill battle to win the war from here. But Ukrainian grit combined with Western weapons and advisors have proven to be a force to truly be reckoned with. Now go check out how Russian tactics to take over Ukraine will backfire, or click this other video instead.